Welcome and thank you all for joining our annual Veterans Day commemoration at the Scottsdale Civic Center Memorial Lawn. Here in the presence of the chaplain and the monument to the fallen. These are impressive monuments to those who have worn the uniform, our uniform, serving our country. Special thanks to the Scottsdale Fire Department Pipes and Drums for bringing our attention to this beautiful event. Let's hear it for them. You do know that's our fire chief on the lead bag, so. We have an outstanding program which is presented in partnership with Scottsdale's own American Legion, Site Peterson Post 44, and Veterans Wars Stanley A. Cruz Post 3513. Thank you. I'm Dave Ortega, Mayor of Scottsdale. It's my honor today to be your host. Thank you. To begin our program, the American Legion Post 44 Honor Guard will present our nation's colors. Once the colors are posted, Kim Jones from the American Legion Auxiliary will perform the national anthem. After the anthem, please remain standing. Pledge of Allegiance led by Commander Randy Dyness of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Chapter 3513. Honor Guard, please post the colors. Oh, good. Kim?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Please be seated. Before I begin, I would like to recognize fellow members of the Scottsdale City Council and other dignitaries that we have with us today. Please stand up here. Councilman Tom Durham. We have Council Member Barry Graham. We have Councilwoman Betty Janik. Hello, Betty. Councilwoman Kathy Littlefield. Vice Mayor Solange Whitehead. We have former Councilman Jim Bruner. He's an Air Force veteran. We have a former City Council member Don Pryor. He's a Navy veteran. And we have State Representative Laura Turk. Thank you for being here. On behalf of the citizens of Scottsdale and the City Council, welcome to the Veterans Day celebration. It is our responsibility to understand the sacrifice and service of those who wear the uniform. This year, the city's commemoration is officially joined with the ceremony, usually hosted by American Legion Post 44 and VFW Post 3513. We are pleased to present today's ceremony in partnership with humble thanks for the courage, honor, and commitment shared by the men and women who have served our country. No matter when or where you served, we honor your service, your sacrifice, and your dedication. Would the veterans in the crowd please stand if you're able, or please raise your hand to be recognized. Thank you. Equally important, today we celebrate families of veterans. Thank you. When a loved one serves in the armed forces, a piece of you is always on duty with them. So let's give a round of applause to the members of veterans. Today we recognize all veterans, people who may live across the street, who work side by side with us, and volunteer throughout Scottsdale. There are millions of veterans and thousands of individual stories all around us. One veteran I especially remember today is Navy Joe. Joe grew up on the rough Italian side of Chicago. When he was 17, Joe stood 6'5", and his mother was worried that he might end up on the wrong side of the law. Pearl Harbor was attacked, and tall, lanky Joe, with parental consent, entered the Navy. Navy Joe became an expert scuba diver, a frogman, and fought in the Pacific in an advanced team, blowing up coral reefs, and he did the difficult task of recovering bodies. After the war, Navy Joe used his GI Bill to enter college. He didn't study engineering or law or business. He got his degree at beauty college. And within a couple years, owned the most elite, exclusive beauty salon in Chicago. Navy Joe became Mr. Joseph. Tale of celebrities and stars led to glamorous events, which made Mr. Joseph and his wife semi-celebrities too. In the 1980s, Mr. Joseph and Jenny bought a second home in Scottsdale, across the street from where I live. Fully retired, debonair Mr. Joseph left Mr. Joseph behind in Chicago and was Joe again. For decades, Joe and Jenny were part of our family holidays. They left in May and back to their Chicago home each summer and returned to Scottsdale just in time for Thanksgiving. After Jenny passed away, Joe and I spent more time together. Crashed, he asked me to help him buy a new phone. So we went to the cell phone store, and after Joe made his selection, the sales rep said loudly, "Hey, those tats are cool," and pointed to Joe. He pointed to Joe's left leg, since Joe wore shorts. I said to the clerk, "Read them. Read what they say." Inked in cursive on 4 lines were the words Guadalcanal, Okinawa, and 2 others were obscure but wrinkled. Battle tattoos were a reminder that Joe, Mr. Joseph, was always Navy. I remember Joe called very distressed because he had gotten a parking ticket with a fine of $325. He asked me to go to the Scottsdale court and stand with him, so of course I did. In court, Joe froze and couldn't speak. He had a curved back, bent with age, as he stood before the judge. I explained that Joseph did hang the handicap placard on his Cadillac, but it was issued in the state of Illinois, and it was 7 years expired. I said we applied for an Arizona placard, and I would pay the fine, since Joe is a Navy veteran. The judge patted his gavel and dismissed the citation and thanked Navy Joe for his service. I think about my friend Joe, Navy Joe. He was also a grandfather of a wide receiver in the NFL. And Joe would go to the bars to watch the games. That it was the Texans. And by the time halftime came around, everyone knew that Kevin was his grandson. He was loud and he was proud. I think about my friend Joe, and certainly here today on Veterans Day. For many of you in the crowd, you are veterans. Or you know a veteran who embodies quiet, humble service to country, who went on, used the GI Bill, became members of different corporations, hardworking, dedicated members in the city of Scottsdale as well. We do not need to look far to find a veteran living across the street, or at work, or at school, or on duty. God bless our veterans, near and far, on earth and in heaven. God bless America. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to continue with the program. It's my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker. Michael McLaughlin, Rear Admiral, retired, United States Navy. Michael grew up in Mesa, but felt the call of the seas, and so he attended the United States Naval Academy, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in ocean engineering. He was commissioned as an ensign and began a 30-year career in the U.S. Naval Submarine Force. His service included a tour as commanding officer of the fast attack submarine USS La Jolla, and then he was Commodore of the 6 submarines of the Sub-Squadron 11. He served as Chief of Staff of Naval Submarine Forces, then rose to the rank of Rear Admiral. His past post in the Navy was Commander, Submarine Group 2, comprising the 25 attack submarines on the Atlantic coast. After returning from the Navy, Admiral McLaughlin returned to Arizona, joined the Arizona Public Service Company, and served as Vice President of Site Services at Palo Verde Generating Station. Please join me in welcoming Admiral McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Ortega, and thank you, Ms. Jones, for singing the national anthem. I thought that was just absolutely super. Thanks. Commander Dines, Commander Amos, Mark, our veterans of foreign war, the disabled American veterans, American Legion members, and all of our veterans here today, thank you for honoring us with your presence. America is better because of your sacrifice and dedication to a higher calling. We're reminded every day that countries can only survive if they have men and women that are willing to stand up and protect our families, our loved ones, and indeed our nation. Let's give our vets a round of applause. It's always great to be part of a Veterans Day celebration, and it's especially fitting that we are here on the memorial lawn, where we honor the 66 individuals from the Scottsdale area that lost their lives in military service. The story of local communities unconditionally supporting our nation is repeated in cities and towns across the nation, and is a reminder that we all stand together to protect this great country. In one of my roles, I was stationed in the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon. The staff included Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force, all working together. It was a great learning experience on the roles each service played in defense of our nation. On one occasion, we were talking about our experiences during the Iraqi war. The infantry officer stated, "I was in a Humvee for over a month, sleeping when I could, taking baths out of a cup, MREs only for that whole month." The armor officer said, "I was stationed on an M1 Abrams for over a month, never leaving it, not even to go to the bathroom." The Air Force officer explained, "I flew the longest B-1 bomber mission in the war. Once airborne, the timing changed, the mission constantly changed until the moment we dropped our bombs. It was all I could do to stay focused and complete the mission." Now, I was on an attack submarine in the North Atlantic, about as far from the Persian Gulf as you could be. I thought hard about what physical hardships I had to endure, and I said, I was in a submarine, and one morning, the hot water breaker was open, and I had to take a cold shower. And on top of that, we ate cold cuts for lunch. I'm not sure I impressed them with how hard life could be on a submarine. The story does remind me, though, how each and every veteran who served in our nation has a unique and special career. My guess is that no soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine could have imagined how their military chapter would play out. Yet each contributed to the greater good that today guarantees the future of the United States. No matter the role, great or small, thank you for your contribution. Submarines typically operate for weeks or months underway. Once out to sea, they're supremely reliable and steady. However, like all complex machines, getting that submarine up and ready to go to sea was always a challenge. There was always one last lingering problem that had to be solved before the boat could be underway. We typically got underway on a Monday, and I remember on numerous Friday afternoons calling the chief petty officer, that E7, who in addition to the people working for him, had one more weekend with their family before being gone for weeks or months. I called him into my office and we had the same discussion. The story was always the same. Chief, the boat's getting underway Monday and I need you to ensure it's ready. This is going to change your plans this weekend. The answer was always the same, aye, Captain, and I was never disappointed. They and the crew always worked incredibly hard to support the boat. Mission over self is the common theme across our veterans and the reason why we're the greatest fighting force in the world. Thank you, everyone. The mission is constantly changing as we're seeing today, but the dedication, determination, and the risk to oneself remains. To support America's commitment to Israel, 10,000 sailors on 2 aircraft carriers, in addition to all the sailors on board the supporting ships, have been moved into harm's way. They have joined our forces currently in theater that are seeing a sharp increase in attacks. I'm confident that none of those sailors knew what the future held, and I'm equally confident that no sailor wavered from his duty, his or her duty. I also want to recognize the families and significant others that support our military. During submarine deployments, the busiest place in any port is the phone booths located at the head of the pier. There's always a line of sailors waiting to connect with the loved ones, and it cemented just how important our support structure at home was. And for those of you who have never used an Italian phone booth, both connecting and paying for that collect call was a burden on both parties. Thank you again. Just to hit the story home a little bit, my first son was born 2 weeks before I deployed for 6 months. My second son was born 2 weeks after I deployed again for 6 months. On that deployment, I spent 6 months in the Mediterranean Ocean while my wife handled a newborn and a 4-year-old alone at home. I'm confident she had the harder deployment. And in retrospect, I think she should have gotten the medal. The story of my family is not unique and underscores just how hard it is to be a military spouse. Let's give a round of applause to our families and significant others. Thank you again for joining us today to remember our veterans. You all share the common bond of duty over self, and I'm sure that that commitment remains with you today as strong as it did in the past. God bless America. Thank you.
Next, we have from American Legion Post 44, Commander Randy Amos.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out today. Spend a little time with us. Of course, we're going to have food and drink stuff over at American Legion Post 44 after this, if you guys want to come on by. But before we do that, of course, I have a couple stories, and I'll try to keep it under 30 minutes or so if I can. I can't promise it, though. I'm going to try really hard. All right. 70 years ago, one distinguished veteran, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, presented the nation's highest military award to another distinguished veteran, a hero of 2 wars. Hiroshi Miyamura was the son of Japanese immigrants and a resident of Gallup, New Mexico. After serving with the famed El Nisi 100th Infantry Battalion in World War II, Corporal Miyamura was recalled to active duty as a machine gunner in the Korean War. When his unit came under attack by Chinese forces near the Imjin River in 1951, Miyamura estimated to have killed more than 50 enemy soldiers. Despite his own serious injuries, Miyamura refused to abandon his wounded comrade, Joe Anello. He carried him even after both were captured. When his captors threatened to shoot Miyamura if he did not drop Anello, his wounded friend convinced him to listen. The enemy showed no mercy as a severely wounded Miyamura and his fellow POWs were forced to march 300 miles with little food over a 5-week period. Through sheer will, Miyamura survived his 28 months of captivity. Miraculously, so did Anello. The battlefield actions that led to Miyamura's Medal of Honor were initially classified top secret by officials who feared that the enemy might retaliate against him if they had known the event of the harm that he inflicted on their forces. On November 29, 2022, Hiroshi Miyamura transferred to what we in the American Legion refer to as post-everlasting. He was 97. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the types of heroes America continues to produce. In many ways, humble at home, but ferociously brave on the battlefield. Another Medal of Honor recipient, retired Marine Colonel Harvey Barney Barnum, described the combat that he saw in 1965 at Operation Harvest Moon. "We came together as a team," he recently told the Associated Press, "and you know there's no fury unleashed that's greater than that of a bunch of Marines that know that their buddies have just been shot." Unquote. On July 29, 2023, Colonel Barnum attended the christening of a future destroyer, the USS Harvey C. Barnum Jr., an appropriate honor for an American hero. Most Americans profess to truly love our veterans, especially at gatherings like this on Veterans Day and Memorial Day. And while their feelings are sincere, it is important to remember that veterans are defending us 365 days a year. The heroism that has been demonstrated time and again by veterans, from the American Revolution to global war on terrorism, is sometimes unnoticed by many who enjoy the security that their sacrifice has provided. Not all veterans have seen combat, but all have at one time made the solemn promise to sacrifice their lives for this country if called upon. Without the strength that veterans have demonstrated in war, Americans would never enjoy their daily freedoms. It was none other than George Washington who said, quote, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effective means of preserving the peace," unquote. For many veterans, our nation was important enough to endure long separations from their families, miss the births of their children, freeze in sub-zero temperatures, roast in faraway deserts, lose limbs, and far too often lose their lives. Their families serve and sacrifice as well. Military spouses have to endure career interruptions, frequent changes of address, and a disproportionate share of parental responsibilities. The children often had to deal with changes in schools, separation from friends, and hardest of all, the uncertainty of whether or not mom or dad will live through their next combat tour. Warriors need advocates, and that is why veteran services organizations, or VSOs as we call them for short, such as American Legion, VFW, the DAV, exist. We are here to serve veterans, their families, and our communities. Veterans need each other, but more importantly, our country needs our veterans. You cannot fight a war without veterans, and while the utopian idea of a society without war is appealing, let us not forget that wars have liberated slaves, stopped genocide, and toppled terrorists. Stephen Ambrose once wrote, and I quote, "America's wars have been like rungs on a ladder by which it rose to greatness. No other country has triumphed so long, so consistently, or on such a vast scale through force of arms," unquote. We do know that without our veterans, America would not be America. Veterans Day, originally known as Armistice Day, commemorates the armistice of November 11th, 1918, which marked the end of World War I. Since then, this day has evolved to recognize and honor all veterans from every generation who have served in the armed forces of the greatest nation on earth. In times of peace and in times of war, our veterans have exemplified the values of honor, courage, and commitment. They have displayed unwavering dedication to their fellow service members, their brothers and sisters in arms. Their love for country is proven. But Veterans Day is not just a day of celebration and remembrance. It is a day of action. It is a day when we must recommit ourselves to the well-being of veterans and their families. The VSOs continue to remind the public that more than 6,000 veterans a year take their own lives. The 988 crisis line is available to assist anyone who is contemplating such a heartbreaking and tragic outcome. In this era of uncertainty and division is our veterans who serve as a unifying force. They come from all walks of life, representing the rich tapestry of our nation, yet when they put on the uniform, they become an even greater power, the embodiment of the American spirit. Our debt to these heroes can never be repaid, but our gratitude and respect must last forever. Thank you for being here. God bless America.
Well, thank you, Commander Amos. Thank you, Navy boatman Mark Mastro. And most of all, thank you to Admiral McLaughlin. We salute your service and thank you sincerely for being a part of today's ceremony. This is the first Veterans Day commemoration with this memorial as a backdrop. Many of you were here with us in March when we formally dedicated Scottsdale's Memorial for the Fallen, a monument to the 66 Scottsdale area residents who died while in military service to our nation. Before we close today's ceremony, we have one more special speaker. Many of you know Joan Fudala as Scottsdale's community historian. What you may not know is that Joan served 21 years in the Air Force, retiring as a major. And thank you for your service, Joan. Joan was also on the board for Scottsdale Memorial to the Fallen, the organization led by Jim Geyser, who's the leader to get this monument built. He made this memorial possible. So let's welcome Joan Fudala, who will tell us more about some of the men whose names are here on this monument.
Thank you so much, Mayor Ortega, all the other speakers, and thank you so much, Scottsdale, for paying so much loving attention to our veterans. As a Scottsdale community historian, I've had the privilege and responsibility for researching and sharing the life stories of so many Scottsdale veterans. In fact, I pretty much made it my mission to learn as much as I can about Scottsdale's military and veterans history, and then share that history with so many of you throughout the years. And Scottsdale truly has been a model community for welcoming, saluting, and treasuring our service members and veterans. And just as a side note, I'd be remiss, in fact, Jim Bruner would chastise me if I didn't remember one special person that really saluted our veterans, and that's Mrs. Zena Kuhn, who in 1989 started our veterans ceremony that we've held every year at the Railroad Park, and today is combined with the traditional ceremony that the veteran service organizations have had here at City Hall. Last year on Veterans Day, I announced the planned dedication of a very special project that would honor the military service and the ultimate sacrifice of 66 Scottsdale area residents, all of whom never had the opportunity to become a veteran. And here we are today in front of this beautiful monument. As the mayor said, it was dedicated last March and is the Scottsdale Memorial for the Fallen. It's been now a key feature of the Scottsdale upgraded Civic Center, and along with its companion piece, the Chaplain, is a wonderful place to come, to pause, and to remember. And as the mayor said, nearly 10 years ago, U.S. Marine Corps veteran and Scottsdale High graduate Jim Geyser put together a small committee of veterans and military family members to brainstorm how Scottsdale could honor those residents who had died on active duty in war and in peacetime. And let me tell you, Major Geyser was totally gung-ho in his desire to create the Scottsdale Memorial for the Fallen. With the city's blessing to create the monument and locate it here, Jim spent countless hours researching the names to be etched on the monument and nearly single-handedly raised over $400,000 from donors, both large and small, to fund the monument. Of particular note are a couple of major donors, the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community and Paul Messenger and the Messenger Mortuaries. And I might also mention, as a real tribute to our love in Scottsdale for veterans, both the Chaplain statue and the Memorial for the Fallen were totally privately funded, again, showing our commitment to our veterans. So who does this obelisk honor? The names represent residents from Scottsdale, the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community, the Fort McDowell Indian Community, and perhaps some who lived in what's now the town of Paradise Valley when it was considered Greater Scottsdale before any of the towns got incorporated. 23 attended Scottsdale High School. 3 went to Arcadia High, 4 to Coronado, 2 attended Saguaro High, and 1 attended the Judson School. They served in the U.S. Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, and 1 even served in the Royal Canadian Air Force during World War II. 3 are World War I casualties. 25 lost their lives in World War II. 6 were lost in the Korean War era, and 25 are casualties from the Vietnam War era, and 7 have been lost since 2001 in conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of the names on the monument you might recognize, others you need to know. And time permits me only to offer a sample of our Scottsdale heroes' names, but you can learn a lot more by going on the City of Scottsdale's website and searching Memorial for the Fallen, and most of those 66 names have background information on these incredible heroes. The first casualty listed on the monument is Henry Rothrock, a private with the 19th Aero Squadron in France in World War I. He died trying to save a pilot from a burning aircraft, and he died on October 17, 1918, less than a month before the end of World War I, and now he's buried in France. World War II casualties Travis Sipe, a Navy pilot, and Clayton Peterson with the Army Air Force were Scottsdale High classmates, and they are memorialized not only here on our monument, but also in the name of the Sipe-Peterson American Legion Post 44 here in Scottsdale. Sipe was lost at sea, and Peterson died in Romania, but is buried in the American Cemetery in Belgium. Another World War II loss from Scottsdale High School was Army Air Force Private Stanley Cruz. He died while serving in the Philippines. And Stan is remembered also in the name of the Stanley Cruz Post 3513 of our Scottsdale Veterans of Foreign Wars chapter. Pilot George Hinton III died in an aircraft crash during World War II in Alaska, and he had been the student body president of Scottsdale High. His father, also a veteran, George Hinton Jr., served as the American Legion Post 44 commander in 1946, and an adjacent avenue, Hinton Avenue, is named in their honor. PFC Carl Lay succumbed from wounds he received fighting on Christmas Hill in North Korea in July 1953, and he also entered the Army after attending Scottsdale High. Army First Lieutenant William Kaiser, an artillery forward observer, was killed in action in Vietnam in October 1967, and he was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star for valor. He, too, was a graduate of Scottsdale High School, where he was a standout football player. Specialist 4 Donald Hanna, a 1966 Coronado High School graduate, was killed in Vietnam only 3 weeks after arriving in country in 1968. U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant Clinton Alquist, who attended Saguaro High School, died in Al-Anbar, Iraq in February 2007. An IED exploded while Sergeant Alquist was guarding a medevac helicopter. And his obituary said he'd always wanted to be in the military, usually dressing up as G.I. Joe on Halloween. Army Major Steve Hutchison, a Vietnam veteran and Scottsdale resident, left the military and then came back in after 9/11 and served at age 60 when he died in Basra, Iraq in 2009 when an IED detonated near his vehicle. And Army Sergeant John Rogers died in June 2010 while serving in Afghanistan. A Scottsdale resident, his obituary read in part, "John's love for his country and his family is beyond the scope of anyone's imagination." A dozen of our 66 memorialized fallen are buried in overseas cemeteries or were lost at sea. A few are interred at Arlington National Cemetery. This makes the Scottsdale Memorial for the Fallen the local place for surviving family and friends to pay tribute to their heroic loved ones. So I ask you, please honor our fallen heroes by visiting this memorial often. And when you do, say their names aloud. It's a time-honored tradition that if you say their names aloud, their memory and their sacrifice will live on forever. Thank you.
Well, in closing, we do want to thank all the veterans and families who have built this beautiful city of Scottsdale and who remember those who have made our city possible. Today, I also want to acknowledge Cub Scout Pack 618. Thank you. They've been very diligent in posting and alternating their posts. Also, we have the Mayor's Youth Council over here, who are high schoolers and who are learning more about our local city government, our healthcare system, our entire profile of our city. And they have chosen this year as their topic as voter engagement. That is the voice, the powerful voice granted by our Constitution to get involved and understand how to keep our democracy strong. So thank you very much, Mayor's Youth Council. You may also notice Scottsdale has our own cavalry over there, and that's the mounted police. Amazing. You know, we're filled with gratitude for all of our veterans and families and our special guests. We also had some sponsors for today. Thank you to Wildflower Bread Company and to Neighbors Helping Neighbors for providing refreshments for today's event and for supporting veterans in our community. Thank you. And of course, the Scottsdale Fire Department bags and pipes, drums, they have moved on, but they do a tremendous job, and they're on duty 24/7. So I will ask our veterans organizations to close today's ceremony. The Post 44 Rifle Squad will give a rifle salute. Then Post 44 Chaplain Billy Martin will close with a prayer. The Honor Guard will retire the colors, followed by taps. You can stand if you're able. If not, we will salute and conclude with Post 44 Rifle Squad salute. We'll have the benediction.
I'd like to say that I also am a combat veteran. I served in Vietnam in 1966 and 1967. I stepped on, we called them landmines. They call them IEDs today. And I'm here in front of you. I didn't lose a leg, and I was blessed by God. I don't know where you, thank you very much. Anyways, it's been my honor and my pleasure to be at many of these. I have served as chaplain of Post 44 for the last 8 years, and I hope I continue on for a while. So if you'd please uncover, I'll offer a benediction. Dear Lord, today we pray that you will bless them for their unselfish service in the continual struggle to preserve our freedoms, our safety, and our country's heritage for all of us. Bless them abundantly for the hardships they faced, for the sacrifices they made for their many different contributions to America's victories over tyranny and oppression. We respect them, we thank them, we honor them, and we are proud of them. We pray that you will watch over these special people and bless them with peace and happiness. Amen.
Post will retire the colors. Have a beautiful day. Let's enjoy one another.